USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, February 6th, 2023, where each week we look back at the highlights of the weekend and the news of the week. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four this April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Get your tickets now at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Well, we've had a lot of weeks where the top teams lay an egg. Number one will get swept, but number one was idle this week, Minnesota. But the top teams did pretty well. Let's start out east. Quinnipiac got 2 wins. They beat Harvard 3-0, and Dartmouth came back to win 4-2. To me, the win over Harvard is the most impressive.
Well, I actually got to list both as pretty impressive. They were struggling against Dartmouth. I got to watch that game on Saturday and got a late power play, tied it, found the game winner right after that, and then didn't take their foot off the pedal, scored again as Dartmouth got into some late game penalty trouble. But, Harvard, obviously, that's a really big win. Harvard, the pre-Beanpot games, those are some of the hardest to play. It should have been a game that Harvard gets up for, and I think they actually did, but Quinnipiac was good and shut down that Harvard offense, the team that has the most draft picks in college hockey. That's a pretty stout offense right there, and Quinnipiac did a good job. They continue to impress. They had that one just lost weekend that you just shook your head at a couple of weeks ago, but other than that, this has been a consistent Quinnipiac team.
Yeah, you know what? I had a chance to peek in both those games, and I was very impressed with the pace and the excitement and energy of the game against the Harvard Quinnipiac game. I mean, I thought there was a great crowd. There was enthusiastic. It was a really good hockey game, and Quinnipiac just was. They were spot on. They look like they've overcome their weekend at their, like you said, lost weekend at and then winning the Connecticut Ice. So they've taken some steps. And wait, I shouldn't bring up Connecticut Ice. That might be a little sore spot with you, Jimmy. Are you're over? Okay, good.
Fine.
Okay, good. I just wanted to bring that up. You had a rough weekend with that. I mean, so, but then a weird a later game on 8 o'clock start. I found it. I thought I was watching tape delay because all the other games were over, and I was flipping over to start the West games, and still see that game going, and watched some West games, and came back and saw the late power play. 2 different types of games. I thought Quinnipiac was spot on in the first one. And then when I watched them, they were scrambling a little bit, to get that comeback. Not as much energy in that game. Maybe they used it up, but that's the mark of a good team. You're not always going to have your A game, to find a way to win when you don't have your A game. And they did that.
BU got a single win. They've got the Beanpot today, so just one game over the weekend, beating Maine 4-3. However, Maine is a pretty good story lately too, but BU seems to be on a roll.
Yeah, I look at Maine as a good win for BU. Maine ended up beating Merrimack Sunday. And I'm about to go into a production week where I end up with Maine twice, calling 2 games of theirs on Nesson, and I haven't got dug into it. But the last time I had looked at Maine since like mid-November, they were one of the top 4 teams in Hockey East in terms of their record. So, and it doesn't seem to be letting up. If they're losing games, they're losing close games. They're winning against good opponents. So that's a good win for Boston University. Excuse me. A tough single game. If you're only going to get one game, probably the last thing you want to do is head from Boston to Orono, 4.5, 5 hour drive without traffic. I do know I talked to Jay Pandolfo. They stayed over after that game on Friday so that the guys could just sleep in a bed and not have to sleep on a bus coming home. Then they drove back on Saturday. I believe they probably took Saturday off, practice Sunday, and now they have the Beanpot tonight. So it'll be a bit of a hectic weekend for a single game, but you got the win, you got that out of the way, and BU keeps rolling. One of the 3 hottest teams in the country right now.
that had the makings of a trap game.
Absolutely.
You're looking towards Northeastern. You're looking towards a bean pot. You're looking towards that. That had the makings of a trap game, and they found a way to get a win. And you stole my thunder and talking about Maine, how good they've been lately. Also, I mean, Merrimack, I thought that might be the stop of their slide a little bit. And they just, I mean, I think they're down in the 20s now in the pairwise.
22, I think, as of this morning.
You wouldn't have, would you ever thought that at Christmas? I think they were
they were three.
As high as seven.
Three at Christmas time. They were number 3 in the pairwise. Yeah.
So, I mean, let's just say an interesting weekend if you bring those 3 teams in the mix, with BU having a potential trap game, Maine taking them, giving them all their worth, and then going and beating Maine or Merrimack on Sunday. And now you've got the showdown here between Northeastern, who really needs this one. This would be really big for their pairwise hopes.
Well, no surprise, I don't think, with Michigan and Wisconsin. Jim, you pointed out in our Friday podcast that Wisconsin hasn't won a game on the road.
It's one road win in Big Ten play since Cole Caulfield left. that's the sentence right there. That's a lot of games played.
You had Ed confused there for a little bit. He was going to throw out a date. It would have been even more impressive if he would have got a date in there.
In any case, Michigan has been scoring goals and buckets, and they did this weekend 6-2 and 7-4, and huge numbers of shots too. No surprise there. Michigan seems to be peaking at the right time of the year.
Pucks are going in the net. 13 goals again this weekend. We said it on Friday, hammer the over in these games, and 6.5, I think, was the over under. They, not as comfortable on Friday, but plenty of comfort on Saturday. 11 goals between the two teams. I just look at this Michigan team as they might actually be more comfortable this year than they were last year with all of those high end first round draft picks. They still have a lot of good talent. We know that. I just feel like the expectations aren't there that they have to be the number 1 seed, that they have to cruise to a Frozen Four, that they have to get into a national championship game. I think that was there all year last year. And I feel like this team, they struggled at the start, and now they're playing with a little bit more whimsy. And by the way, they're in second place in the Big Ten right now. 4-way tie for second place, albeit, but they have 2 games in hand on 2 of those teams that they're tied with. So I love the way that this team is playing. If they can keep it going, nobody's catching Minnesota. You can give Minnesota the regular season crown, I think, in the Big Ten already, the way that they're playing. But Michigan might be, the second best team out of the Big Ten.
Points in 7 straight. And the only points they've lost in overtime in Minnesota. They beat Minnesota in overtime, but went 2 wins over Penn State, 2 wins over Wisconsin. The splits there kind of with Minnesota. Ohio State is split. Really, since the first of the year, they've really kind of been rolling. They were one of those teams that you were a little underwhelmed with, I think, in the first half. The one thing that does concern me a little bit, when you're getting into 1-game knockouts and you're scoring a lot of goals, can it dry up in those 1 games? We've seen it numerous times where offense gets dried up in those 1 games. Their goaltending hasn't been, and you don't want to knock Portillo because he's a great goalie, but he's given up 4 in those I guess in the 7 games there, he's been given up 4 times. Penn State 3. So there's a lot of goals being in those games. You talked about the over. There's just a lot of goals being scored, and in a 1-game knockout, that's what scares me with an offense. As an offensive coach,
right?
You hope that 1 game that they don't find a way to shut you down. You don't hit a goal post. They still have to tighten up a little bit defensively. To give up 4 goals in 4 times in the last 6 games is a lot.
Yeah, I can't remember a ton of Frozen Four games in the last decade that the score has been 6-5 or 5-4. There was one that
there's a lot of regionals though.
Regionals, yes, but you're still talking about how do you win a national championship, and the road to a national championship is usually pretty good defense and goaltending. So that could be something that tests them. But we've seen some of these teams that can just roll. I look at the BU team of 2015 with Eichel. That thing was just a monster in terms of what they produced. And, we've had some of these North Dakota and Minnesota teams that were putting up, 4.5, 5.5 goals a game. And that's kind of where Michigan is right now. They're putting up tons of goals. Scoring is not a problem for them, but you're right. I think when you get into the postseason, you have to find a way to somewhat limit what your opponents can get. I wanted to see exactly what they have for goals per game. Or I guess I'm just going to say number of goals. They have 115 goals in 28 games, as opposed to Western that has 125 goals in 30 games. So Michigan and Minnesota have exactly the same. And then you have Western with a few more goals scored, 5 more games played, or 2 more games played. I'm sorry. My eyes are tricking me here, but right now you're talking about 3 teams out there that are just really, they can rely on their offense. I don't love that in the postseason, but listen, if you can go into a Frozen Four and put up 6, you're going to win every time.
I'm a fan of offense. Ed, you know that with the way that we've played. You just get that goalie. We had Shane Starrett get us the 1 year. You get that goalie that just is on fire. You hit a post, then you start getting frustrated. And, that's the only thing that scares me is tightening up their defense a little bit. They're not going to need 6 goals if you tighten it up. You can win with 4. They used to say the first 1 to 3 wins. I mean, you get to 4, you got a real good shot.
Sean Walsh always won with first 1 to 4, but then again, people scored 6 goals a game back when he was coaching.
Yeah, so it's 2.5 now.
2.5.
Well, Denver got a win over Colorado College, 4th straight gold pan for the Pioneers. Denver keeps plugging along.
And they're a strong team. And we know that they're good. And, that game, boy, that got a little chippy at the end.
Ugly at the end, didn't it?
Oh, I'm pretty solid to watch Magnus Krona jump into a brawl.
No helmet, no penalties being called.
Well, that's the whole thing. I don't know what is going to come out of the NCHC league office today or tomorrow, whenever they decide to maybe look at this. But you would think there would have to be some suspensions from that one, because, I mean, just by the letter of law, there was more punches and face washing and, those types of things that usually are supposed to be major penalties. And what came out of it, Derek? 2 minors at the end?
I think it was 2. Was it 2 minors on each team, or 2 minors total? I know the number was 2.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it was a. I watched part of it. It was a good hockey game. Colorado College has just been having a little bit of bad luck lately. Right. I think they're 5 or 6 in a row that they've lost. But they're playing well, and it was a good game. And you never want to see games end like that. You never want to see that happen. And but sometimes that does spark a team. So we'll see where that takes you. I'm surprised when I watched the highlights of that. I was really, because I didn't see that part. I stopped watching. It got late for me, so I stopped watching after the second. But when I saw the highlights of that, I'm surprised there wasn't another goalie involved in it too. That had the makings of something that could really got ugly.
Yeah, for the record, it was 1 minor penalty called on Colorado College, 1 major and game misconduct for face masking called on Denver's Justin Lee, and those were the only penalties that came out of that scrum at the end. So Krona for the goaltender. I mean, you can't penalize a goalie any differently just because he gets involved in a little altercation, but you so rarely see a goalie jumping right in, and he was ready to go in that situation there.
He wasn't on the outside. He was right in the inside.
Oh yeah, right in the middle of it. I mean, I'm surprised the other goalie, maybe I didn't watch long enough, didn't come down from the other end and just pull him up and say, "Hey, let's go."
That's why I said it had the makings of a bad. I mean, we've had a few of those this year. I don't remember. I mean, we had the one in Omaha with Fairbanks, and then that one all after the end of the game. I don't remember a lot of end of the game stuff as much as there has been this year.
Well, we had one in game. I'll just interrupt our flow for a little bit on this one. RIT at Canisius on Friday night. In the third period, referee Andy O'Brien got injured and had to leave the game, leaving one referee, C.J. Hallman. There was a collision with a goaltender that resulted in kind of a melee of everybody on the ice against the backboards. And Hallman, as the lone remaining referee, said, "All right, everybody, you five guys, everybody in the box." Then he went in and watched the video and decided who got 5s and 10s and who would get 2s. And he just handled it pretty well. I don't think the coaches liked it that much, but when you're the last referee, you got to put your foot down. And he really
old school.
Yeah. No, so it was, that still happens, but that's why RIT is going to win the dubious honor of the most penalty minutes this season by far.
The most, at least they're not getting the Sportsman Award. That was always the jinx.
Yeah.
You get the Sportsman Award, then you're like, really?
Many coaches across many leagues tell me that, like, if it looks like we're in a position to win the sportsmanship, telling a guy take a run and get a 5 and 10.
I think that's the award that you don't want.
No, everybody says
there's no bonuses in your contracts either for the Sportsman Award. You get All-American, Hobie Baker, you get Coach of the Year. There's no Sportsman Award bonus.
Minnesota was idle, and that's going to help them in the poll. They're going to be number one for sure again this week in the USCHO.com poll. The only blip among top teams was St. Cloud State. They got swept the weekend before. They played 2 ties, 3-3 and 1-1 versus Miami, although they won both of the shootouts and got 4 out of 6 points. So what does this say about St. Cloud, and what does this say about the fight still in Miami?
Well, St. Cloud, maybe they need, they're struggling a little bit. You're talking 4 games that'll win. This is a team you're supposed to beat in Miami, but I do think that Miami, they have a lot of pride. Chris Bergeron's a coach that has a lot of pride in him. I'm sure he keeps that in the locker room. They've had just a brutal year, but they're going to want to play spoiler, and why not? I will say that, for the Huskies, getting the 2 shootout wins is big. Those 2 extra points go a long way to keeping, you can't make it, lost weekend after lost weekend. Cause I think they got one of 6, I think the week before. And then they, could have been in a position to get 2 of 6 out of this weekend with the 2 ties, but to get 4 out of 6 points will help them a little bit, but they've got to right the ship a little here.
Yeah, I agree with you on Miami. They've got too much pride there, and they're going to play spoiler. I mean, they're going to have some teams at home. Their arena is a tough place to play. But obviously this being on the road, what have I always said? You got to get the 4. You got to get 4 of 6. You've always won 4 of 6, especially if you're at home. And St. Cloud did that. So do you say that it's a bad weekend? They're still where they're at for a reason. They're a good team. They're going to be in the tournament. They're going to win some games down the stretch. I wouldn't look too deep into it, other than Miami's going to take some points from people. And good thing they only took 2 and not 3 from St. Cloud.
But if you're sitting there, you're Brett Larson, you still know that this can't become a habit.
Yeah, you're right. But teams are going to go through these times. You're gonna go through times that you struggle. You're going to go through times where you're hot. I mean, it happens. It's such a long season to keep everybody on point, and that's the impressive thing that some of these other teams like Denver and Quinnipiac and Minnesota have done. It's hard. I mean, it doesn't get easier for St. Cloud now. They got to go to North Dakota, to Nebraska, Omaha, and then at home against Minnesota Duluth. So it doesn't get any easier. But going on the road sometimes gets you back into it, and having to play, North Dakota in 2 weeks because they're off this week might be a great time for an off weekend for St. Cloud.
Perfect timing. Yeah, I agree with you.
Well, let's talk about some other teams that are hot right now. Cornell beat RPI in Union 10 goals, the second team this season to score 10 goals that against the Dutchman on Saturday. That included 6 power play goals for the Big Red.
4 power play goals inside of a minute on the same major penalty. That would be my record. I've seen 3 power play goals in a major. I've never seen 4. And from what I believe, if I read right, they scored a 5th goal 2 seconds or so after the major ended. So you want to talk about a team that their offense has come alive. That's Cornell. They had their struggles early. This might be the most dangerous Ivy League team out there. If not one, I'm interested to see them if they match up against Quinnipiac at some point in the postseason. That would be a very dangerous game for Quinnipiac as well.
I mean, I'm more impressed, and I'm jumping down the script here a little bit. Is Michigan Tech? I mean, Michigan Tech, they sweep Bemidji. They're a point behind Minnesota State with 6 games left. I mean, I kind of wrote Michigan Tech off after the Great Lakes, and I thought Bemidji was going to be that team to kind of give it to them, and I'm wrong. Michigan Tech went into a tough Bemidji place and did that. So there's a lot going on in hockey right now. A lot of good teams out there that you're going to find some teams that get to the end that are going to be left out of the tournament that you're going to say, wow, I'm surprised about that.
And Tech now a top 10 team in the pairwise. You're at the point, you're almost at that mid-February point that if you're top 10, you can just lock yourself into an NCAA spot. And Joe Sean's club is just about there.
Western Michigan, we talked about them in the Friday podcast. Jim thought maybe they might be susceptible to Minnesota Duluth. It kind of looked that way on Friday, but they came back to win in overtime and won on Saturday in regulation 4-1. That train keeps rolling too.
Well, we talked about that. Minnesota Duluth, they were going to have a challenge after having some good games, and they get a point. Western Michigan just keep rolling, and they're getting to that point. I think they're getting to that top 10 ranked team too. And I don't think their schedule, they're not going to lose a lot. This is another NCAA tournament team.
Yeah, no doubt. They're 1 win shy of 20. I think that the way that they've shown of late, I thought that this might be one of those difficult series for them. And I watched the end of that Friday game. Fantastic game, fantastic ending. Great goal. Guy just stays with the play in overtime, stuffs one inside the left post. But I feel like Western right now is another one of those buzzsaws out there. Will they climb up? I mean, that's what the NCHC is kind of waiting for, is for one of these teams to climb up and put themselves into a number 1 seed, whether it's going to be Denver or St. Cloud or Western, or those are probably the 3 most likely candidates. But right now, the NCHC, for as strong as we know that conference is, they don't have a number 1 seed if the NCAA tournament started today.
What a different team Pat Ferschweiler's got than Andy Murray. Andy Murray was tight defensively, and Pat in his 2 years, I mean, he's going to have probably close to 40 plus wins, maybe even close to 50 wins his first 2 years as head coach. I mean, that's pretty impressive. And he's just taken it and taken really good players that Andy and he got in there and made him into more kind of like an offensive dynamo. And that's got a buzzsaw, like you said, that can't stop. And potential Hobie Baker in Poland.
They've got 4.17 goals a game. They're only giving up 2.57. So you've got some good defense. So it's not like they've just abandoned defense to score goals. You're talking. There's not a lot of teams in the country with a 1.6 goals differential. That's pretty solid. You're going to win a lot of games when you're plus 1.6 goals on average per game.
First one to 4.
Michigan State, they were 1-6-1 since the semester break heading into the weekend, but they get a sweep of Notre Dame. Has that turned things around for the Spartans? And what does that say about the Fighting Irish?
We need to see in a couple more weeks of Michigan State. I think I'm more worried about this Notre Dame team than I am bullish on Michigan State. Notre Dame's they're putting themselves in a position where they were at one point in a pretty good pairwise spot. Right now they have slipped down to 17. They're below the bubble. They're not even technically eligible for an at-large bid right now. 1 game below 500. So that's where my concern is. Michigan State, they put themselves back into an NCAA position. They are right on the bubble at 14. But we need to see another couple of good weekends from Michigan State for me to regain my belief. Because the stretch they were on, that 1-6-1, that was a pretty tough start to the second half.
Well, I think we're going to find out if they're both legit tournament teams here. Obviously, their schedule is their schedule, but Michigan, and Michigan State this weekend. Doesn't get any bigger than that. And Ohio State goes into Notre Dame. So you're going to see where they both kind of stand after this weekend. If Notre Dame continues their free fall, and if Michigan State can continue to rise, because they're both in that little, like you said, tough area to be in right now.
And the last one among hot teams, and it's been a great season. Some good goaltending and transfer Matt Radomski, but Alaska swept Arizona State. Nanook's 19th in the pairwise.
They've got a chance. Give them a chance, right?
Well, I had a chance to follow along with that one a little bit, and Arizona State kind of dominated Friday's game. I mean, you look at all the analytics, all the stats, everything. Arizona State, there's no way they should have lost that game, and Fairbanks found a way to win. And you go on the other side, then they handled business pretty good on Saturday. Once again, I mean, is their schedule going to be good enough to be able to get them? I mean, even if they run the table, will that schedule get them good enough to get into the tournament?
You know, I feel like if they can, I believe they have 6 left. If they can win, or maybe it's 8, if they can win all of their games, and they are all winnable games, they are games that they should win. You do that. I think that you have to think that there'll be enough, where they are right now. There's going to be teams that are going to slip. If they don't make any mistakes, I look at their schedule. It's not the strength of schedule that they have to have. You're talking about, they're going to get the 4 against LIU. You're supposed to win those. You're going to have 2 against Lindenwood. You're supposed to win those. Then you get the 2 at Arizona State. Those are the tough games, right? Those might be the 2 toughest. And those might be the games that determine whether you hold on to a bubble bid or not. The tough thing, and I've said this before, the toughest thing is not having any play after the regular season. You don't have a chance to win yourself in a tournament. And that's the independent model. So I think that's where things will be a little bit more difficult, but I'd love to see it. We were so high on what Arizona State needed to do to get in as an independent. We forgot about what Alaska needs to do to get in as an independent. It's been a long time since they've been in the tournament.
They just literally, you talked about their schedule, the 4 road games, they get those there. That'll be good, but it's hard to go 8-0 down the stretch. And they've been playing every week like it's a playoff game, because they had Anchorage, which is their rival. They split with Denver before that, and then to beat Arizona State twice. I mean, that's a pretty good stretch they're on right now.
It's a fantastic run.
Yeah,
you're talking about 5 of your last 6 wins. You beat Denver in there, and if you end with 8 straight, 15-1 down the stretch. Did I just do that right? No, I didn't.
Well, they split with Notre Dame before that.
Right. So there's plenty in this team, and they've, some of those games that they played earlier in the year and won might help them when you really look. You look at the win against Omaha, the win against Northern. I know it's not that great. Win against RPI, the win against Notre Dame, the win against Denver. All those, a lot of those games on the road too.
Well, let's take a break. We've got some news to look at as we continue. USCHO Weekend Review is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida.
All right, class, it's the NCAA Men's Frozen Four. Welcome to Fandom 101. Want to help your team rule the rink? Here's your assignment. Lesson 1, go big for every goal. 2, when you bring it, bring enough for the whole class. And 3, attendance is encouraged, but passion is mandatory. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Buy your tickets today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
We're back with USCHO Weekend Review. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Some news this week is Atlantic Hockey picked its new commissioner, Michelle Morgan. She comes from John Carroll University as the athletic director, Division III program, a very good Division III athletic school in Cleveland, Ohio. She's had a background working in the NHL with the Blackhawks and the Minnesota Wild. She's served on a number of D3 NCAA committees, so she's got that background in governance or herding cats, if you will. She's an alum of St. Thomas, where she played women's hockey. Really surprised a lot of people. People who were on the selection committee and ADs were all very quiet. Nothing leaked out about this at all. It's an out-of-the-box hiring, as a lot of people thought it might come from within the league or maybe from another league. This is very reminiscent of a decade ago when the NCHC brought in Josh Fenton as actually their second commissioner. What does this mean for Atlantic hockey for them to really look to go in a different direction, probably fitting this current era?
Well, I think we're moving on from, you saw it with Hockey East, moving on from Joe Britannia to Steve Metcalf, a different type of leader. And the people that I've talked to have spoken so highly of Michelle Morgan. And I don't know her, never met her. I'm looking forward to meeting her. But right now, everything that I've heard is extremely positive. Very good at social media, very good marketing background. So, like I said, kind of the old school generation of you used the word, I think, mom and pop earlier, which is nothing wrong with that. That's how things were run. Now it's going to be social media, Twitter, Instagram, all that kind of presence that she's already on. And I think it's going to be a breath of fresh air. It's going to be different. Bobby D has done an outstanding job with Atlantic hockey, getting it to where it is. And now it's time to take that next step and to bring somebody in that from all things I've heard, hates to lose and is going to want to boost Atlantic hockey. I'm excited for it.
I think this is a good hire. And I love that it's a shocking hire because, we had to, I don't think we ever brought this topic up onto one of our podcasts, but we've had the off-air discussions, especially with you two more tied to that league of, who would it be? Brian Riley's name has been thrown around for almost 2-3 years now, as a coach who could take the step to administrator. We heard a couple of AD names from inside the league mentioned. But Michelle Morgan, when I read the resume, I kind of took a step back. I said, hey, okay, what's the tie to hockey? Where's the hockey person in here? But she has some good hockey background, obviously played the game herself. It's not, there'll be nothing that's lost on her. She seems sharp, forward thinker, really important. And I want to give a hat tip to Bob DiGregorio. I mean, I worked around this league before it was Atlantic hockey. I was covering that league when it was the MAC, and I knew Rich Enzor and the people that ran that league, and they did a nice job trying to organize things way back when. And then the movement to Atlantic hockey, I felt like Bob DiGregorio made steps forward with that league that I don't think a lot of people. Listen, when these teams all got together back in the late 90s, it was supposed to be just so that they wouldn't have to drop their hockey programs. Nobody had visions of playing in NCAA tournaments. And that's where, both Rich Enzor and Bob DiGregorio took this league. Jack McDonald should get a lot of credit for that when he was the Quinnipiac athletic director back in those days. But now we're at a precipice where there's a next step to be taken. And I think that you need a real forward-thinking leader, and I think that's what Michelle Morgan will bring to this league. I'm excited to meet her. I know we're going to have her on our Spotlight podcast a little bit later this week, but I'm sure at the Frozen Four Coaches Convention, I'll have a little bit more time to meet her, and I look forward to it because I think that this is what college hockey needs. You need young, forward thought. People that have led this sport for a long time. No disrespect. They've done a great job. I know we are in a good place in college hockey, but you've still got to have somebody to take you across the next finish line.
And I think one of the things, and I'll let you give your opinion after, but there's so much going on with the NCAA right now. There's so much like with the transformational group and all of that's happening in the NCAA. You need somebody that drives that and can guide through that process, that knows that. And that's the hard thing. I mean, I've been on committees, but I've been on the rules committee. I've been on the championship committee. It's still tough to figure out actually how to get things accomplished within that. And I think that'll help. And like you said, Atlantic hockey, when it was started, 8 scholarships. It's worked its way up to 18. I mean, you can't say enough about what Bobby D did. And it was at 8 teams, went to 10 teams, went to 12 teams, down to 11, down to 10, back to 11. He's went through a lot within this. And I gained a lot of respect for Bob, how he handled us getting back into the league and everything that we went through. And it's like you said, he's retiring, and it's in a different direction. And I'm excited to see that direction. I'm sure the meetings will be a different than they have been in the past. I'm sure everything will be run. I mean, it's going to be, it's just different. And I know, Ed, you've had your share of Atlantic hockey, and I think I'm excited about it. I'm sad that Bobby D's leaving, but I'm excited about a new leader in Michelle, and I look forward to meeting her and listening to your podcast on Wednesday.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. I think that moving things forward is the best way to pay tribute to the legacy that Bob DiGregorio will leave. If things just sort of kept going along and maybe somebody safe and expected was in there, then maybe you'd say, okay, the league is sort of got where it is and is happy. But to be able to bring in the kind of talents and experience that a modern Division I league needs is good. Funny note, this means that both the commissioner and Associate Commissioner Todd Bell will both be St. Thomas Tommies alums. So that's kind of interesting. They're Minnesota taking over Michigan.
Cue the rumors of St. Thomas to Atlantic hockey.
Go. One question this brings up, though, and just to bring it up, we don't probably have any answers, but ECAC still looking for its successor to Steve Hagwell. Does this impact that? Does this maybe inform us about what that league might be looking for?
Yeah, I don't have the exact timeline where they are in their process. But I have to think that there's some candidates that are more similar to Michelle Morgan than maybe to an insider, a hockey insider. I don't like the word old boy, because I don't think an old boy's reference is not appropriate here. There are a lot of people who work inside this game that have been inside the game for a long time. Steve Metcalf, let's start right there, who's not considered what you would say the old boys network of hockey, and they're great, forward thinkers. I keep using that term. But I do think that if you're sitting there, if you're ECAC, you're saying, are we looking at the right candidates? If you didn't have a candidate like a Michelle Morgan on your list, are we looking at the right candidates? And I'm sure they're engaging with an executive search firm for this. And that's usually how you come upon these candidates. And you realize that these people, these are leagues. I get it that these are all leagues. They all run as nonprofits, but this is still a business that you're running, and you run businesses a certain way. You need a business leader to get your league moving forward. I know it's great to have somebody that understands the game of hockey, that, has ingrained themselves in the game of hockey for much of their life. But at the same time, you can just bring a great business leader in to make the right decisions. That's really what a good commissioner should be.
Well, let's keep on the NCAA theme. The committee made an official announcement about taking Stonehill out of the RPI and pairwise calculations. That stirred up a little controversy on social media. Jim, you and I talked about this last Wednesday morning before doing some of our podcast work. The pre-championship manual didn't list Stonehill. There hadn't been clarity, and we made some inquiries, and you got the results of that inquiry in a confirmation that Stonehill would not be included in those. Is this the right move? I'm going to say yes. And what are the impacts on other teams? I think I'm going to just say right off the bat, probably little changed, but some clarity was found in the whole thing. Yeah.
And here's where the confusion came in. Stonehill is in a way kind of similar to what happened on the women's side with the NUHA. In a way, I say, and then you had when the NUHA was formed, you had a bunch of women's teams come in, played mostly an insular schedule, didn't play other teams. if they did play those teams, those games counted in the RPI, but it was because the root of their schedule was amongst all other Division I teams that were in the reclassification process. Stonehill was doing this on their own. They were playing a schedule that is basically Division III with 5 games against Division I teams. I know for USCHO, I can speak for the folks that would do the RPI and pairwise on our end. We treated it like the new hire. Well, this is a team that's coming up, and if they play games against Division I teams, they count. Well, clarifying that better with Chad Tolliver, who's the head of championships for the NCAA. He runs the ice hockey championship, does a great job. He said that it was never really an issue to them. It was just, there was a realization. It was brought up by Tim Danahy, a name we've mentioned many times in this podcast before. He used to run college hockey stats, but he's also been a consultant to the NCAA on things like the pairwise and RPI. And he brought it up and said, there's sites out there that are confused about how this should be handled, how Stonehill should be handled. So when the championships committee got together last Wednesday morning, one of the topics was what they were going to do. There was never a vote taken. I confirmed that with Chad Tolliver over the weekend. There was never a vote taken because there was nothing to vote on. It was just the decision was made. Yes, let's make sure that we can make it clear to everybody out there that Stonehill is not going to be used this year in any calculations, RPI, pairwise. It did stir up. I know UConn was one of the schools that I think that day in our calculations dropped from 15 to 17, which we know that's across the bubble line. And their athletic director posted some stuff on social media, which I don't blame him for. It's hard to understand this whole process. But from what I can tell, there's no real benefit to any team that played a downline team from either LIU or Lindenwood, the two clubs that will play Stonehill. If you played those teams, your schedule eventually would be weakened by the fact that, these teams, LIU played 2 more games. They blew away Stonehill both nights. And now Lindenwood's going to get them, I think, this weekend or next weekend, but they'll have a couple of games against them. That's not beneficial to any team that was down line and played them. So an opponent's opponent for the RPI purposes. So the best decision was to take them out, and you'll see that at the end of the day, if we want to put them back in and show a recalculation, you're not going to see anything positive happen to most of the teams that were down line in the RPI.
That being said, next year, I know they've got at least 2 games. They're playing us. We're playing them.
No, I think they're playing a more robust Division I.
So they are moving in that direction.
Yeah, and the one thing that Chad Tolliver did say, he's committed to making sure that these issues are clarified before the season begins. So, and I think it's incumbent upon everybody that publishes a pairwise, whether you are doing it by making sure you do the formula yourself and publishing it, or you're just copying somebody else's. It's incumbent upon everybody to touch base with the NCAA and clarify. And it sounds like they're very open to making sure that this is an issue that doesn't happen again, so that they can, by getting in front of it at the beginning of every season.
And there's going to be other new teams coming along too. They're going to be teams that are moving up and playing games and transitioning. So there is going to be this issue moving forward a lot.
Well, I want to bring up one other thing, and mentioning teams coming up. Last year, there was a lot of discussion about whether Utica University would move its athletics to Division II and its hockey to Division I. I bring this up only because of the game that happened on Saturday, last regular season home game for Utica in the Division III UCHC against King's College, a 6-2 win for Utica. And you see that and say, okay, they're the number 1 team in Division III. No big deal. King's College goaltender Ismail Ralston made 90 saves. Utica put 96 shots on goal in that game.
Wow.
Wow.
I know that's probably not anywhere near a record. I can remember hearing of goaltenders in the hundreds, but they were losing 22-0 back in the 90s. I don't know how well the Division III records are kept, but that's a lot of shots.
Utica's got a roll, and I was looking the other day. They're moving. Yeah. They got, I think, their 6th straight league championship that they're in now, and 7th overall. We talked about Michelle Morgan. This is another thing that potentially down the road. I don't know when, but there will be an expansion talk eventually, sometime within Atlantic Hockey. There's going to be expansion talk with other teams. So this isn't just going to be Atlantic Hockey.
Yeah, and they did this in front of 2,800 fans.
Pretty good.
They lead Division III in attendance perennially. Anyway, I thought we'd throw that in just because of that 90 save performance and those 96 shots on goal.
Hats off to a 90 save performance. Sorry for the loss.
Get him some Gatorade for the ride home.
Well, USCHO Weekend Review has been sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th in Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Secure your seats at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Find our podcast at uscho.com/podcasts or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. For Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Weekend Review.